early voting is now underway. We've seen some fairly good-sized numbers in our area. What is voter turnout going to be like, do you think, between now and May 24th?
I think that statewide voter turnout is going to be really, really low. Anemic might be the word that I use to describe it. I think the Secretary of State's office projects about a 20% voter turnout in the party primaries, which would be low for party primaries. We're seeing that in some of our polling data by how many undecided voters are out there. And I think once you kind of get into some of those down ballot statewide races, it gets really difficult for people to make a choice because they don't know who they're going to vote for in some of those. I think they'll go out and vote for the top of the ticket, but they really struggle. Now, local races being heated and competitive in the primaries will change that for a region. So I think the Fort Smith and the Northwest Arkansas region have a lot of competitive primaries. I would expect turnout to be bigger there, but statewide, it's going to be pretty low overall.
And those races on a more local level, those are the ones that are vying for state house and state senate.
And some of your go on down to justice of the peace. I mean,
yes.
You know, those races are the ones that excite some local people to turn out and vote for their friends and neighbors and people they go to church with and whomever else that they, you know, are influenced by. So yeah, those numbers can definitely be bigger. And I would say this too, because there's going to be more local races in your viewership region of the state. I think it carries more influence as to what happens statewide with some of these races that might be a little nip and tuck, like Secretary of State or State Treasurer or Lieutenant Governor.
Let's talk about those state races. The big races, of course, the governor's race, lieutenant governor, and even on a federal level with the Senate race. But let's focus on the governor's race. There are 5 Democrats that are vying for this position. Does anybody make it past the 50.1%? So there is not a runoff.
Well, in our polling, we show Chris Jones, the far and above the strongest candidate among the different Democrats that you mentioned there. None of the other Democrats in our most recent polling got over single digits. So he's bumping up against 60% already, which he spent about a year on the road. Mm-hmm. He's had some really good media. He's had a lot of good, he's raised a lot of money. He's had a lot of good infrastructure that he's invested in, whereas a lot of these other candidates have just not had a lot of money, haven't made some of the same infrastructure investments. There's still about a 30% undecided in that Democratic gubernatorial primary. So I wouldn't say that the fat lady's singing, but I'd say that she's running through some scales right now.
Why is there such a large undecided this close?
Well, I think that goes to that low voter turnout. I think people are turned off about politics. We're so divided in this nation right now. We've seen it for a couple of election cycles. I think this is also, you got a lot of new candidates this time around, and those that haven't had money haven't had a real opportunity to get their name out there and boost that name identification. And then I would say maybe finally, one of the other reasons we see some of this low voter turnout is the names are in the big races, and in those smaller races, you just might not know who all's running in those.
On the Republican side of that, there's no doubt Sarah Huckabee Sanders is the front runner, even to November.
She is the favorite to win the Republican nomination and the favorite to win in November. There certainly is truth to that. She's a little over 72% in our most recent Talk Business and Politics Hinders College poll. Her challenger, Doc Washburn's about 16.5%. I think anything short of 65% for Sarah Huckabee Sanders on election night is almost a defeat, even though she'll still win. But the expectations for her are extraordinarily high. She's raised a ton of money. She already came into the race with high name ID and a lot of popularity among Republicans. And I'll say this too about the governor's race, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and if it turns out to be Chris Jones on the Democratic side, that's going to be a history-making election in the fall, no matter what, for Arkansas. We're either going to elect our first female governor in the state of Arkansas, or we're going to elect the first African-American to governor in the state of Arkansas. Either one of those things would be hugely historical.
And of course, lieutenant governor's race, not a lot of folks put a lot of stock in that office, but there are some interesting candidates involved in that race as well.
I think the lieutenant governor's race is the one that may fascinate me the most of all the races on the ballot, because you have such a variety of candidates. I mean, from Attorney General Leslie Rutledge to State Senator Jason Rapert, Greg Bledsoe, the State Surgeon General, Washington County Judge Joseph Woods, former GOP Party Chair Doyle Webb, Chris Beckett running as an outsider, and he's got a nephew that's running for the U.S. Senate. I'm sure I'm leaving off somebody on that list of candidates. Kelly Kraut's the definite Democrat in that race come November, but those other Republicans, they're all running in these different lanes of conservatism, and they've got different bases of support. And so it's Leslie Rutledge is the front runner right now. She has the most name ID. She's about at 40% in our polling. I don't know if she gets to avoid a runoff or not. That'll be the big question to watch. And if she doesn't win without a runoff, which is probably the expectation right now, who's that second place finisher that comes in right there to challenge her 3 weeks later? That's going to be a fascinating race to watch.
You know, and with the U.S. Senate race, it reminds me a lot of when Senator Bozeman ran up against Blanche Lincoln. Not a lot of thought went into, oh yeah, he's going to win that race because of her longevity in that race. But this race with Jake Beckett has become very interesting over the last month or so.
Yeah, it has, and in our polling, John Bozeman is about at 45%, and there's still about an 18% undecided based on when we came out with those poll numbers. So I think that there is an opportunity for him to get over 50%, but if he does, it's going to be just over 50%. I mean, and if it does go to a runoff and it's either Jake Beckett or, Jan Morgan, Heath Loftus is in that race too, I think that it's down to Beckett and Morgan in terms of who might make a runoff with him, with Bozeman. All bets are off at that point in time. Voter turnout in a runoff is going to be extremely low. It's going to be isolated to where there are other local runoff elections. And I think that you will see some national folks play in this race if it goes to a runoff. Some people that want to see John Bozeman taken out and see an upstart, far right candidate win versus maybe some of the more establishment Republicans that are a big portion of John Bozeman's base. I think we'll see a lot of activity, smelling some blood in the water, really going after a really prime incumbent there if it goes to the runoff.
Are you surprised that your polling has him below 50% right now?
I'm not. I think Jake Beckett has benefited greatly from some outside money, as well as he's done decently on the fundraising front. I think that it's an electorate out there right now that is still, very upset still about the 2020 election. And you've had Jake Beckett and Jan Morgan both appealing to that base in a big way. I just don't think that base is the majority of Republicans at this point in time. But I'm not surprised to see him under 50%. This is a pretty tough election cycle for an incumbent to run, even a Republican incumbent in a state. And I think when you see the people that are supporting John Bozeman publicly, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is way up there in the polling, endorses him. Tom Cotton, popular incumbent senator in the GOP circles, endorsing him. And of course, he's playing up his Trump endorsement in a big way. Those are all messaging things that John Bozeman has needed to do just to get to 45%. So when we poll John Bozeman normally just on job performance, he always kind of performs, in the high 30s, maybe low 40s. So he's never way over the threshold on that, but he always wins on election day. So never underestimate him.
Of course, on the state house and state senate level, I don't want to go through all the candidates, but suffice it to say that the primary will be busy for both the House and Senate. The question I have is it going to be decided now or in November as far as who maintains control of the House and Senate? Are there enough Democratic candidates that would overtake the House or the Senate?
Yeah, really, the Democrats did not field enough candidates to win back the majorities in the House and the state Senate. So the Republicans are going to stay in control of those two chambers at the state level. Now, they could pick up enough gains to make it much more interesting. If they were to run the table with a lot of their candidates, the Democrats could erase the super majorities for the Republicans. I still think the odds are not in their favor for that at this point in time. I'm going to be from Missouri. You're going to have to show me that happening before I'm going to believe it. But if you built some bigger minorities in the state legislature, you could block some bad legislation a little bit more. You could be a little bit more effective on committees. You could be a little bit more effective on potential veto overrides and things like that. But I kind of define the state legislature in this election cycle, Darren, and we'll know more after May 24th in the primaries. We'll know more in November. This is a reset election. All of those district lines have been redrawn. And we know historically over the last 10 years how some of those districts have performed, because we've got election cycles that show us this is where more voters turn out. This is a bigger voting base right here. With those lines being all withdrawn or redrawn right now, it's really hard to tell, who has an advantage in a certain, legislative district. So we'll see from the voter turnout this primary and general election kind of how those newly drawn Senate and House seats effectively perform. And that's going to give us some indication of what to expect for the next 10 years.
I wonder if any of those lines that have been redrawn changes the strategy of how a candidate runs. I would imagine they still go after the voter no matter where they live.
Well, they do. I can tell you from my long ago days in political consulting, you'd always look at a legislative map, even after redistricting, and say, where are the votes? If this city or community always has stronger turnout and your candidate's not from there and they're facing a candidate from there, it's a disadvantage. So your strategy is, where can I drive up votes in places where this person's not as strong as I am, because they've got maybe more votes in the district from their home base than I do. And those are always really difficult races to kind of plan your resources and your targeting. But that's what's going on with all of the 135 races right now in the state of Arkansas.
All right. Should be fun between now and May 24th. Roby, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Darren. Good to be with you.